There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, this whole Ruby Frankie case, Jody Hildebrandt, it is quite bizarre, as you folks have been saying in the chat. And when you really take a look at this case, the commonality and the power structure behind all of this stuff is the Mormon Church, the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And every time I take a deeper look into this, every time I check into this story, that's what comes up, is that the church extends amazing influence over these people. Just in, yes, a cultish way that they control these people's lives. And almost everything they do, from the way they make a living. In this instance, you see on this flyer on the screen, Julie DeRue and Bonnie Holline, who are the two sisters of Ruby Frankie, who are also podcasters. And they're criticizing their sister Ruby, but are they not part of this whole, basically this machine that is putting the word out there? The Church of the Latter-day Saints. I have people reaching out to me since I've been doing this story and say, oh, I used to be a Mormon and I got out of the church because of this, that, and the other thing. However, they're quite afraid of going public. Scary, right? That you could go public with some tremendous allegations of wrongdoing, yet you're afraid to do so. And yeah, it's just, it's scary. It's quite scary. And as I look into this, and even the mannerisms of many of these people, the Ruby Frankie's sisters, I played some of their video the other day, and they seem almost robotic in the way that they speak, in the way that they talk, and the fear on their faces and in their eyes. Is it fear for her, or fear for her children, fear for what's occurred here, or is it fear that they could possibly lose their channel, their YouTube channel, because guilt through association? They're not towing the company line, let's put it that way. They're not towing the line of the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And that, to me, is a little bit scary. Not a little bit, a lot bit scary.
As her once popular YouTube page, the 41-year-old mother of six is staring down the barrel of 6 counts of aggravated child abuse over allegedly starving and neglecting at least 2 of her 4 minor children. The abuse that police say these kids sustained will break your heart. Daily Mail exclusively spoke about the accusations with Cynthia and Jennifer Frankie, Ruby's sisters-in-law, and they shed some light on the family dynamics. Jennifer was not a fan of Ruby. Quote, I've never really liked her from day one. She always thought she was better than anyone she's around. If you look up narcissist in the dictionary, there will be a picture of Ruby.
Ouch.
Now, Ruby herself, alongside her husband, Kevin Frankie, proudly displayed their family to millions of followers on their 8 Passengers YouTube page. Ruby was a strict mother and over the years consistently defended her harsh parenting style against criticism. Cynthia and Jennifer Frankie are married to 2 of Kevin's brothers, and they've been estranged from Ruby's side of the family for about a decade. But they told us that they had no idea about the alleged abuse and suggested that the real problems may have started when Ruby got mixed up with business partner Jody Hildebrandt. Now, to be clear, a lot of what they heard about Jody was through the family grapevine, but Jennifer and Cynthia were told that she lived with the Frankies from 2021 to 2022 and was giving them marital counseling. Hildebrandt is a therapist with a checkered past. Her license was put on probation back in 2012 for discussing a patient with LDS church leaders. This is according to the Salt Lake Tribune. Now,
What does it say that a therapist is discussing a case with LDS church leaders? Why? Why would she do that? Well, because they're referring clients to her. So there's a quid pro quo there. There's a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But when you're a therapist, there's something called confidentiality. And that is supposed to remain. Dr. Edward Moskowitz says HIPAA. Yes, there are laws, and you're not allowed to discuss patients with anyone. They're unless you do it in an anonymous way. You don't mention the name of that patient. I've seen it when I was in college. Even psychology professors would talk about cases leaving out the name of the person who they were talking about. So there's another, we're touching base there. There's another piece of evidence that the LDS church, the Mormon church, is involved in areas that they have no business in.
As of recently, Jody ran her own online program called Connections, which offered self-help courses. But as far as Kevin Frankie's family was concerned, quote, it was a cult. Jennifer Frankie said, quote, Kevin was in a men's group at Connections. He had a checklist of what he needed to do to be better. And if you did, they would praise you. If you didn't, they would chastise you. Now, we know Ruby was intimately involved with Connections because she co-hosted a podcast and a YouTube channel with Jody called Connections Classroom. Frankie and her children were actually staying with Hildebrandt last month when police got a call from a neighbor about a starving, emaciated child asking for help. Cops say Frankie's 12-year-old son had escaped out of a window at Hildebrandt's home. Now, both Ruby and Jody were arrested on felony child abuse a short time later. Now, in a previous video, I went into detail about Ruby Frankie's claim to fame, her now defunct family YouTube channel called 8 Passengers. And the reason I bring it back up is because she stopped posting on 8 Passengers at the start of 2022, and during that same time began appearing with Jody on Hildebrandt's page Connections Classroom. 2022 is also when Jennifer and Cynthia Frankie claimed that Kevin was, quote, kicked out of the family home. Now, in the days leading to her arrest, when...
Are we all seeing the dynamic? Jody Hildebrandt gets involved. Kevin Frankie is booted out. Kevin Frankie is a PhD that teaches in the engineering department at Brigham Young University. Who owns the university? The Church of the Latter-day Saints. Are we connecting all these dots? Are these disturbing dots? Yes. The control of their lives, from their livelihood to their marriage, is rather disturbing. And as we peel back this onion, as I refer to it as, going toward the middle, it gets rotten. The onion goes rotten.
According to police, at least 2 of her children were being starved inside of Hildebrandt's home. Jody and Ruby were busy posting new content. Police have said that they actually used these videos as proof that both Frankie and Hildebrandt were in the home when the alleged child abuse was taking place, and they used it to help them secure their arrest warrant. These YouTube videos essentially place Ruby at the scene of the alleged crime in real time. And while that does not prove her guilt, that will be determined at a trial, it was enough probable cause to secure her arrest. After the arrest, all 4 of Ruby's minor children were placed in the care of the state. Then, the whole case took an unexpected turn last week at a hearing to determine custody, when Ruby made her own shocking accusations of abuse against her children. Daily Mail was the first to report that during a Zoom conference, a tearful Ruby made shocking claims that one of her 6 children had been sexually abusing one of their siblings for years. Frankie told the judge that this particular child of hers began watching pornography at 3 years old.
That is really disturbing and really difficult to believe, that a 3-year-old started watching pornography. How did the 3-year-old have access to a computer? Weren't you doing your motherly duties and watching your child? How does a 3-year-old even know how to go on a porn site? And as a parent, first of all, I don't believe that a 3-year-old could do that. Second of all, isn't it your job as a parent to supervise your child enough to ban them from going on the computer? I mean, you didn't feed them, you banned them from other things, and all of a sudden you're going to say that a 3-year-old is viewing porn on the computer. To me, that is very, very difficult to believe.
She claimed that the child went on to repeatedly sexually abuse their sibling for years and then alleged that the victim then joined their abuser in molesting other children in the family as well as the neighborhood. Frankie told the judge that the child confessed to her in May and admitted to abusing some 20 children. Our reporter covering the hearing said that it was crickets after she made these accusations. No one said a word for quite a bit, and Ruby didn't present any evidence to back her claims. Now, pending some sort of investigation into these sexual molestation claims, the judge determined that the alleged abusing child would be placed in a temporary home with no other children. Now, more details about that alleged molestation will be laid out at a future hearing. I got a lot of questions about these incredibly troubling accusations.
You know, folks, these type of accusations made by a parent who herself is in hot water right now, there is a way to investigate this, of course. Uh, on the NYPD, we have a unit called the Special Victims Unit, and you see it on TV. It's a really commercialized look at what they do. They don't do anything like what they do on TV. All they ever see special victims do on TV is investigate murders, and they don't do that. Homicide does that, but TV, they take poetic license. It sort of pisses me off that they do that. Even if the murder involves a sexual assault, it's special victims. It's not their case. It's a homicide's case. So just to lay that out there, so you know the reality of it. But anyway, in real life, Special Victims does an outstanding job. There's two parts of Special Victims. One is the sex crime area of Special Victims, and the second part is child abuse. So these investigators are highly trained in interviewing children, and they will get to the truth. If Utah has a similar unit that is as good or close to as good or as well trained as the NYPD Special Victims Unit. It's such an important unit, so important to be able to speak to children, especially about these embarrassing topics that a detective has to be able to get to the bottom of, to the truth. Because look, children learn how to lie from their parents, but their parents are bigger liars than they are. So it's important for a detective to be able to get to the bottom of it, and they will. They'll find out. And of course, I did a show the other day, and I said, who's going to be cut a deal first, or who's going to be looking to get a deal first? Ruby Frankie or Jody Hildebrand or Kevin Frankie? Because I believe that he is totally involved. So all of those questions will be answered shortly. Let me get back to this.
The first being, how did a toddler develop a long-term porn habit at 3? It just seems wildly far-fetched to me. Now, when these new accusations of abuse hit the headlines, many of Ruby's detractors wondered if she could be fabricating them to explain away her own alleged abusive behavior. Basically, by suggesting that she was left with no choice but to starve her kids, duct tape their wrists and ankles, and tie them up with rope because they were molesting people. Because you have to remember, those are the allegations she is currently up against. According to an arrest affidavit, Ruby's 11 and 10-year-old children were discovered by police severely malnourished with duct tape on their extremities and open wounds that police said appeared to be caused by being restrained by ropes.
You know, folks, that is extremely hard to explain. If she's trying to toss all of this on the children, how do you explain these injuries? How do you explain that they were malnourished? And a few weeks ago, Law and Crime had FBI agent Bobby Chacon, who I highly respect, on the show. And he said, it takes a long time to become malnourished. It takes a while of not getting the proper nourishment that you become emaciated. It's not an overnight thing. So explain that, Ruby Frankie, and explain that, Jody Hildebrand, that these kids are in your house. You sick two individuals. And now, again, they're pointing at they're going to be pointing like this, not at themselves. They're not going to take responsibility for this.
I will admit that part of me is wondering if what we're seeing here is Ruby laying out the groundwork for a future defense when and if her felony abuse case heads to trial. Cynthia Frankie is also thinking along those same lines. She tells us, quote, "I don't know what to believe from her. I think she's lying. She's putting the blame on her two kids to validate what she did to her children. At this point, I think she'll say anything to save herself. I do believe the allegations against her." Last month was not the first time police had been contacted regarding the Frankie children. Ruby's oldest, Sherry, who's 20 years old and no longer has a relationship with her mother, said on social media that she had been trying to get the police and Child Protective Services involved with her mom for years. Last year, Sherry called the authorities to do a welfare check on her siblings because she feared the children had been left unattended without parental supervision for days. People magazine reported that police went to the house, but that the children wouldn't answer the door. The responding officer was able to speak with neighbors, however, who reported that Ruby would routinely leave the kids alone for long periods of time when she went out of town. According to
I find in this instance, and I referred to this case a couple of times, the older daughter, Sherry, called the police for a welfare check. The police responded, and the children, of course, trained by Ruby Frankie and Jody Hillebrand not to open the door to anyone. And I found the police to be remiss in their duties. If someone makes an allegation of imminent danger to a child, you're the popo, you're the police. Knock the door down. You do not need a search warrant, right? You don't need a search warrant in these cases. Imminent danger, all right? Read the exceptions to a search warrant. That's one of them. So I found that a little bit outrageous that the police walked away from that situation.
a police report, quote, "They expressed great concern about the two youngest children being homeschooled while the two older ones go to public school, mostly because it shows they're home alone during the day by themselves and there isn't any way for them to contact emergency services if needed due to them not having phones and a landline not being available in the home." Prior to that, the police were called to the Frankie's Utah home following reports of children running down the street unattended. No arrests were made in either of those instances, but that all changed in August when a Good Samaritan called 911 about a child in distress. We obtained that 911 call and a warning. What you are about to hear is extremely sensitive.
Just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty.
Despite a recommendation to release Frankie on her own, we're cognizant because she's not considered a danger to the community. The judge remanded the blogger back to jail along with Jody Hildebrandt without bail following their initial appearance in court. Ruby and Jody are back in court September 21st.
She's not a danger to the community. How about, is there a possibility that she's a flight risk? She's facing time, right? Could she potentially be a flight risk? You bet she could be a flight risk. That's for sure. So unbelievable to me that they were going to release her on her own reconnaissance based on the evidence here. And not just allegations, but evidence of some bad things. And people have also told me that in this community, it goes all the way to every institution. The police are somehow involved in LDS, the courts, the attorneys. That's scary. If the power structure goes up in one direction and they're controlling over all society's institutions, then how can you get a fair break? How can this be a part of a country that is a country of laws if the laws can be subverted by a religious institution? Very scary to even think about. But I'm getting this information from you guys out there, many of you who are from this community. This is Court TV.
A little bit of that video from Bonnie Holan.
This feels like a very impossible video to make. The more I learn, my feelings are turning more to anger. I am mad. I am mad at what has happened. I am beyond disgusted, and I feel like it makes me tremble. It makes me tremble because it is unheard of. It's truly unbelievable. We did not know what they were doing because, like we said, we were cut off. We did not have access to anyone. I don't agree with how extreme they are on everything. I knew they were weird. I knew that they were off. Those are the things that we kept quiet about, because what was I going to say? What was I going to do? I was not going to come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister. I didn't post because I physically couldn't. I physically could not turn my camera on.
You know, folks, just realize this is her one sister. This is Bonnie Holan, Hoellein. She's also a vlogger. So do you think she's going to risk her living, how she makes her money, by making a statement against the church? No, she's going against her sister. And how she seems mad, but it seems like everyone in this case has their head in the sand, knows nothing, sees nothing, has no idea, has no contact. Do you buy that? I don't think I'm buying it. She also seems somewhat robotic in the way she speaks.
I physically could not come up with a structured thought in my mind. I felt completely out of my mind. This has hurt every single person in our family. I am not my sister. I am not my sister's mistakes.
Her own family's turning on her. She's got a status conference coming up on September 21st. Ruby Franke, the last time she had a hearing in court, it was a Zoom hearing, and the Zoom feed almost crashed because of all the people that were watching Ruby Franke make her first appearance for child abuse charges. This is a very, very popular and very, very controversial mom fluencer. Let's bring back in our think tank. We don't want to be alone. Brian Watkins, Philip Dubé. Philip?
I don't think I want to listen to them, but, you know, yes, a very popular mom, popular vlogger, popular person on YouTube made her living that way. However, she's now also with another Connections, that site Connections, that Jody Hildebrand, a counselor. Basically, let's say she's a counselor for the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. Why do I say that? Because she was getting referred clients by them. She lost her license because she violated confidentiality by reporting back to the church on the progress of one of the persons that they referred to her. So you see the big circle here? The big circle is, it seems that everyone is involved in the church. Everyone. And it all goes back to the church. Rather disturbing, I would say. I'm going to play her other sister. Put her on the screen.
Has about 225,000 subscribers. She talks about not needing to defend herself, not getting too deep into the weeds about this. She does talk about a sudden split from Ruby and brings up Jody Hildebrand. Listen.
3 years ago, Ruby, everything was great. It seemed to be fine anyway. We were a typical family. She was getting some therapy counseling because their family needed it, which I think is great. However, I think you need to get it from a great source, read the reviews. Jody Hildebrandt and her website or therapy style, I don't know what you want to call it, connections, was not a great resource. And we all saw it. We all felt weird about this Jody lady. We weren't comfortable with it. We didn't like it. We didn't like the teachings Ruby was bringing to the family functions. And we were this close to telling her, if you come to our family events anymore, we do not want to hear what you were learning through connections because we don't like it. We never did say that to her, but we thought it. Anyway, so 3 years ago, Ruby and I hung out bottling tomatoes. And then a few weeks later, crap hit the fan and she left the family. And she didn't even call me to say, hey, you know, Julie, you're doing this and this. I don't like it. You're living your life in distortion. So I'm going to have to take some time away from you. No, literally nothing.
Julie then goes into how Ruby lied about her life and removed herself from certain family and friends. Julie says she tried to get in touch with Ruby, but she would not respond.
I was very fortunate to have been able to reach out to her daughter, Sherry, once she was an adult, and we were able to form a really close, strong relationship, which I am grateful for. And it was then that I learned more about Ruby, and it was then that Sherry had learned about lies that had been told to her. I feel like me and my other sisters have said, we feel like we've just been kind of floating on a cloud here these past few weeks. We are in complete shock still as to what she had done because we had no idea of what was happening. Basically, I'm here to say that.
You know, it seems to me that everyone's in shock. I don't think anyone's in shock. When everyone's in shock, no one is in shock. That's a canonism. That's canon law. If everyone says they're in shock, then you just totally de-emphasize that word. You delegitimize that word because shock is a very strong word. And again, all these folks were ignorant to what was going on, according to them. When they found out, they were in shock. They had nothing to do with Ruby. They see how they distance themselves, which is very common from people who don't tell the truth. They're shocking. It's shocking. They distance themselves and they have no idea. They had no idea this was going on. My God, I cannot believe this. When people say that, you know they're lying because the three things don't add up. Shock, not knowing what happened, and you can't believe it, you know. It just does not add up.
I had no idea what was happening. Like Bonnie mentioned in her video, we are not going to let Ruby destroy another thing in our lives.
So you notice there's some gaps in the video. We would call this a spliced video, right? This is how I describe it to people. A raw interview, you can hear the breaths, you can hear the moments in between those things. These were kind of thoughts spliced together. Finally, Julie shares why they use their social media platform. She says she tries to bring positivity and light into other people's lives. And that is why they didn't talk about Ruby for about 3 years in their content. She also said they wanted to show the highs and the lows of family and parenting every day, but that Ruby was not supposed to be part of that content. And quote, it was none of your business, she said to everybody. After seeing this video, I did try to reach out to Julie to see if she'd speak with me today. She said in this video, she's moved. I tried to get in touch with her nearly a week ago as well to get her side of things as this continues to obviously impact their family. No response. So I did try to get to the family today, but let's talk to you about how we've been getting into this over the last week or so. We have talked more about this on our website, kutv.com. I invite you to take away some of our coverage.
So, folks, that's, there's more, and I'm going to play more, but no one knows. No one knew what was going on. It was so shocking. 4 months ago, a gentleman by the name of David Nielsen, who worked for the Mormon Church in their finance area, he was a whistleblower. And it turns out that he went on 60 Minutes. It turns out that the Mormon Church has 100 billion with a B billion dollars in assets, in financial assets. And he went on to blow the whistle because they were lending money or backing corporations and companies, businesses with their money, which of course is tax free, while slobs like us, middle class people, that's who the IRS goes after, not gigantic religious monopolies. Why do they need this amount of money? If they're not using that money to better the lives of their constituents, of their parishioners, of their followers, then what do they need $100 billion for? And in no way is the Mormon Church, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the only religion that does this. I believe the Catholic Church is one of the wealthiest institutions on this earth, both in property and assets. So why do we, and some of you may feel go against this, but why do we, as the hardworking middle class, have to pay, let's say, a third of our income to the government, and these religions collect a slush fund basically of $100 billion, and they invest in businesses that aren't subject to taxes? And what is that money for? And when this bishop was interviewed on 60 Minutes, basically it was almost like, well, I'm just quoting in someone's substance what he said, almost like, for a rainy day, for when the Messiah returns back, we want to make sure we have enough. What the hell does that mean? Is that crazy? I don't get it. I just totally, and in my humble opinion, I believe that religions, all of them, should pay taxes. Maybe it would take a little of the burden off of us, so we don't have to pay so much. Maybe they should pay a little bit, but they don't. Where did that come from? There's something called separation of church and state, but how about separating the church from some of their money? Because obviously, Dr. Edward Moskowitz, yes, I saw this on 60 Minutes in Australia. Yeah, it was very eye-opening, And Dr. Moskowitz, I'm sure that the Mormon Church of the Latter-day Saints is not the only religious institution that has this type of money. Mel Stiller, religious mafias, just absolutely crazy. Erica Olson, because of the tithings, members are supposed to give 10%, like the Catholic Church. They used to give more to people in need, anyone who needed it, than only church members. Well, the scary thing about this is that religions, specifically the church, we're talking about the Church of the Latter-day Saints, they want people to live their lives the way that the church demands of them. And that's, in essence, how they keep these people in line. And then you have people like Jody Hildebrandt, who is almost like an overseer for the church to make sure that the clients that they are referring to her are living the life as the LDS wants them to live. Very scary. Very, very scary. Cult-like? Yeah, you bet. You bet cult-like. Again, this was the story about the police when they went to Jody Hildebrandt's house, found a panic room, as they described it.
They found a panic room.
He says it's a large room. It's a panic room.
A shocking revelation made by first responders who were called to Jody Hildebrandt's home back in August. After a young boy escaped from the home and ran to a neighbor for help, investigators found a panic room inside.
Hey, LT, there's a panic room inside the garage. Downstairs underneath the garage.
Radio recordings from the Santa Clara Ivins Police Department captured the dramatic moments when the room is discovered.
He says it's a large room. It's a panic room.
First responders were called to the home in southern Utah on August 30th. after a harrowing 911 call came into police.
This kid has obviously been, I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
The caller told first responders a 12-year-old boy arrived at his front door, emaciated and asking for food and water. Investigators later determined the boy was the son of Ruby Frankie, the YouTuber mom who became popular from her 8 passengers YouTube page. For a time, Frankie documented the lives of her family, including her husband, Kevin, and 6 children, to the more than 2 million subscribers. Her YouTube page has since been deactivated.
Eve has been amazingly well behaved for being in town.
But
for
you
like,
yelled at me.
That is such a scary and phony laugh when the little boy says, "Mommy, you yelled at me," and she has this evil look on her face. And just like, if that's not the face of someone being deceptive, I've never seen a deceptive face before, but it's just incredible. The little boy says, or it could even be a little girl, but let me play it again.
amazingly well behaved for being in town.
But
for
you
like,
yelled at me.
shh. The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret. We don't want our viewers to know. That never happens.
Ooh, look at that face. That never happened. That's a little bit scary there.
In my house, I never yell.
Investigators say Frankie's 12-year-old was found emaciated last month with open wounds and duct tape around his wrists and ankles. They say he crawled out of a window of this home owned by Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie's business partner.
Our whole life's goal is to make our kids happy. And most of the time we're trying to make our kids happy. What we're actually doing is being in distortion and inviting them into a controlling dynamic.
Both Hildebrandt
Distortion. What the hell is that? Is that a religious word? Distortion? I've certainly never heard it in my growing up as a Catholic. I've never heard the word distortion.
and Frankie were arrested and eventually charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse each. They were set to appear at a bail hearing this week, but hours before the hearing, it was continued. Right now, they're still being held in the Washington County Jail in southern Utah. In all, 4 of Frankie's children were taken to the Department of Child and Family Services after the 12-year-old escaped. Per the recording of first responder audio, it's possible the other children were being held in the panic room.
Temple, we've got it, but we can't get into it. My guess is that would be where they're at.
First responders say a large Fort Knox vault door led to the room with a wheel on the front.
Yeah, he says it's downstairs and it's underneath one of the garages, and he's calling it a safe room. He said something about Fort Knox, so I don't know if it has a Fort Knox door or safe on it, but that's what he's talking about. This one says Liberty Safe Company. It's got a big wheel on the front.
Law and Crime Network reached out to the Santa Clara Ivins Police Department for more information about the rescue and that panic room, but we're told that no new information or details could be released as the investigation is still ongoing. Reporting in Ivins, Utah, Sierra Gillespie, Law and Crime Network.
That's pretty scary. That's whether it was a panic room or you learn about something in security, something called a safe room, where if, say, someone invaded your home, you could go to a room that no one else could get into, and that would be called a safe room. But the police right away, in responding to this location, immediately called this a panic room. So where did that come from? Why did they call it a panic room? Had they seen something like this before? That's the scary thing. And I don't know the involvement. How much are the police here guided by the LDS? Are all the police in Utah LDS? So are they in essence controlled? Are the police bosses, or the police chiefs, or the police commissioner? Are they all also involved in the church? How about the district attorney? How about the judges? How about the lawyers? Are they all compromised by this? And perhaps unintentionally compromised, just compromised because they're all members of this church. Scary, right? So then who is going to be the arbiter of the truth? Who is going to be the person making the decisions on the law? How, if the judges potentially are compromised, if the church runs everything and everything is guided by the church's money, the church has $100 billion. That's a lot of money. Oh, but at the end of that 60 Minutes story, the gentleman David Nielsen, who was a whistleblower, the IRS tossed the investigation to the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. Why would they do that? Isn't the IRS a much bigger federal agency than the Security and Exchange Commission? They tossed it to the SEC, and at the end of the investigation, you know what the fine was? They found some wrongdoing, obviously, because they assessed them a fine of $5 million. That's with an M, $1 million. That's a joke. When $100 billion was involved, and that they were propping up businesses that were LDS friendly or perhaps owned by, the church started 20 shell companies. That's the mafia. That is so illegal. A phony, fake company that had a phone with an answering machine attached to it. So when any investigator called, it would sound like these companies, which were phony companies, had an office, had a staff. When it was a shell company, a phony company. Is that a religious institution does that? Isn't that a crime? Are religious institutions, churches, supposed to be involved in crime? No, I don't think so. They're supposed to be above that, and they're supposed to be arbiters of truth, justice, love, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. Remember those words? Now it's like, look, where the expression, doesn't it come from religion that money is the root of all evil? If that's true, then why do all these churches have so much damn money? You know, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective with a New York accent, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us that thumbs up, and ring that bell. It's free to subscribe to our channel. If you're new here and new in the chat and you like what you see, put a 2 in the chat just so I can see who's showing up here that's new. And folks, if you want to contribute to this channel, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube family, our friends, our subscribers, and they help support this channel. Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories from a police perspective, as we say. I'm going to play again Jody Frankie's sister, Bonnie, speaking again to Law and Crime about her feelings towards her sister.
That it was all bullcrap. It was complete indoctrination of this thing that they created.
Sisters of Ruby Frankie breaking their silence after the Mormon YouTuber and her business partner are charged with child abuse.
We all felt weird about this Jody lady. We weren't comfortable with it. We didn't like it. We didn't like the teachings Ruby was bringing to the family functions.
Ruby Frankie is being held without bail on 6 counts of felony child abuse. Now 2 of her sisters are speaking about their suspicions.
We did not know what they were doing.
Frankie's business partner, Jody Hildebrandt, is being held on the same charges after 2 of Frankie's children were found at her home late last month. 1 child had escaped. Here's part of the 911 call.
911, the address of your emergency. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. We know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs.
You know, that's another amazing thing about this is that everyone in the neighborhood and so many people had filed reports against this, made complaints, yet nothing was done. That usually is indicative that there's someone else pulling the strings that is preventing some kind of action to be taken to save these children. And someone, who is that someone? Who is the elephant in the room, I ask you?
He's hungry and he's thirsty.
This story has captured the attention of people around the world. Frankie had been known for her YouTube channel, 8 Passengers, where she and her husband, Kevin Frankie, documented their lives. Uploads appeared to stop last year. That timing appears significant, according to videos posted on YouTube by 2 of her sisters.
3 years ago, Ruby, everything was great. It seemed to be fine anyway. We were a typical family. She was getting some therapy counseling because their family needed it, which I think is great. However, I think you need to get it from a great source. Read the reviews. Jody Hildebrandt and her website or therapy style, I don't know what you want to call it, Connections, was not a great resource.
Hildebrandt's Connections classroom claims to help people with a range of problems through counseling. Ruby Frankie is listed as a counselor on the website. Another one of Frankie's sisters claimed the family had been cut off from Frankie's family.
We did not know what they were doing because, like we said, we were cut off. I knew they were weird. I knew that they were off. Those are the things that we kept quiet about because what was I going to say? What was I going to do? I was not going to come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister and I don't like what she's doing and I think she's weird.
Ruby Frankie has been under fire for many years as viewers of her YouTube channel voiced concern about her strict and what appeared to be emotionally abusive parenting style.
I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm like a mean barbarian, but I told the kids, I said, I'm not even going to let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
The hashtag cancel YouTube vlogger became popular on social media.
I'm not going anywhere.
One of Frankie's sisters said her behavior became more and more strange.
So 3 years ago, Ruby and I hung out bottling tomatoes, and then a few weeks later, crap hit the fan and she left the family. And she didn't even call me to say, hey, you know, Julie, you're doing this and this. I don't like it. You're living your life in distortion. So I'm going to have to take some time away from you.
There's that word distortion again. They use the word distortion. I think that's a church word, or potentially it's a word of Jody Hildebrandt, but you're living your life in distortion. Woof.
No, literally nothing. She did call my mom and yelled at my mom on the phone for 45 minutes and accused her of things that were not true.
Ruby Frankie's siblings are also YouTubers. One sister lays part of the blame for this situation on Kevin Frankie, Ruby Frankie's husband.
So I still stand by what I said, is that I did everything that I could with the knowledge that I had and within the legal rights to Ruby and Kevin. The one person that could have done something within his legal right was Kevin. We had zero contact with him. It was Kevin's job to check in on things, and he did not. So when I say that Ruby and Kevin and Jody and Connections have been destroying our lives offline for the last 3 years, that is exactly what they've been doing, causing turmoil within our family. We would talk in circles because nothing made sense.
But Kevin Frankie's attorney has a different take.
Kevin never had any reason to believe that his children were being abused.
Robert Kester told Law and Crime's Sidebar podcast that Kevin and Ruby had been separated for 13 months, and he didn't know she had taken the children to Jody Hildebrandt's home.
Emotionally, she was controlling him because she knew how much he valued their.
You know, how do you know anything if in 14 months you have no contact at all with your children? So how can he claim to know anything? And according to his attorney, he was being emotionally controlled by his wife. Well, you know, dude, you're a man. I think you better be a man and confront the situation and do it in the correct way, do it by the law. But 14 months, you just took orders from your wife, and she was apparently, or this will probably be her defense, she was taking orders from Jody Hildebrandt. Scary.
Their marriage and valued their family, and it was his desire to be able to get back with the family and preserve his marriage. So he was taking direction from her, and her direction was, it's so much better off, and I think we can salvage our marriage if you just, for now, don't have communication with the kids, and I will communicate with you. I'll reach out to you when we need to have communication.
One of the Frankie's older children, Sherry, shared feelings of relief on Instagram following her mother's arrest. Ruby Frankie's sisters said they were able to reconnect with Sherry.
It was almost as if Ruby had been making up memories from her childhood. She was trying to grab at anything she could, and she would exaggerate on everything. So she started all of her lies back then, lying to everyone in her life, getting rid of all of her friends and family, and I literally had no contact with her. She wouldn't respond to any texts or emails over the time that I tried reaching out to her. Never got a response from her. So I was very fortunate to have been able to reach out to her daughter, Sherry, once she was an adult, and we were able to form a really close, strong relationship, which I am grateful for. And it was then that I learned more about Ruby, and it was then that Sherry had learned about lies that had been told to her.
Despite Ruby Frankie's siblings saying they were being shut out and didn't know the children were victims of alleged abuse, the sisters suspected something wasn't right.
I was not going to come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister and I don't like what she's doing and I think she's weird. That is what we kept quiet about. It wasn't until about a year ago when we were able to reconnect with Sherry again.
That was from a recent video from the sister named Bonnie. She had posted a video the evening of her sister's arrest, but later deleted it.
I don't think any of us could have ever seen this coming. We all did as much as we could legally, and you don't know what you don't know. The only thing that we ultimately care about is that our nieces and nephews are safe, and they are.
Ruby Frankie will be back in court next week on her criminal case. A hearing will also be held about custody of her minor children.
It's amazing that, and I don't believe this, that no one knows anything. Everyone has their head in the sand. No one has any clue about what's going on, you know. But it always comes back, I believe, to the control that the church has over these people, and they're tacitly, maybe even more than that, allowing this stuff and encouraging this stuff. Stephanie Gould, if the sisters had real concerns, report them to CPS. They ultimately care about views, money, and remaining irrelevant. Stephanie, I happen to agree with you. I think in Utah it's called the Bureau of Child and Family Services. I know there's an F in there somewhere. And it's like in New York, it's called Child Protective Services. They keep changing it in New York too. It's changed a million times since I left the job. But William Grant, it's brainwashing. It sure is. I mean, these folks seem like I said the other day, it rang true for a lot of people that, it's Stepford Wife esque. And some of you guys remember that movie back in the day, The Stepford Wives, and JK enabling. Yes. You know, if there really was the family overseeing and caring and, you know, they would see this. I mean, I could see it, and I'm, you know, 1,000 miles, a couple thousand miles away, and we can all see it. And to say, oh, I don't get this. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. You know, that's really hard to accept, hard to believe, because we that are watching this show, we all see it. We all see it. And then when the sisters again, who coincidentally are in the podcast business and have to toe the line or they will lose their income, they don't see anything. They see nothing.
Mental health expert telling him to stay away. The only way to save his family was to stay apart from his family at that point. While he thought they were working toward reconciliation, he had no idea that there was this kind of abuse going on.
This is Kevin Frankie's attorney, and Kevin Frankie, again, another person with his head in the sand, had no idea. He had no contact allegedly for 14 months. How could he have an idea?
She was telling him that everything was blissful and everything was wonderful. That, in conjunction with the fact she didn't tell him that she had taken the kids to Southern Utah to be in Jody's home. He would have resisted that, but she didn't tell him. He was being advised.
All you fathers out there, as you listen to this attorney for Kevin Frankie, who would allow their wife or their significant other to dictate the terms of their separation? And one of the terms was that you're not allowed to see your children. One of the terms was that she moved your children 4 hours away from their home, and you knew nothing about it because you're afraid to even ask. And again, this has connection to the church because guess who Kevin Frankie works for? Kevin Frankie is a professor at Brigham Young University. Who runs Brigham Young University? You got it, the LDS.
Advised by his mental health care professional to stay away from the family and not contact the kids.
Kester does say before his wife's arrest, Kevin Frankie received counseling from Hildebrandt.
During the separation, Kevin was attending men's groups that were facilitated by Jody, and during those groups, he was being downgraded and diminished, and told how bad he was, and that he needed to repent, and that the best way to repent was to not infect his family with his problems, and so that's why you need to stay away. He wasn't the only one in those men's groups that was undergoing exactly what he was undergoing at her suggestion and recommendation.
Just so I get a better idea of what these men groups are, would that be, I mean, what would that entail? They're going to like a group and kind of talking about things. Who are the people who are kind of like laying down the law, so to speak?
Jody. And they were Zoom meetings. I don't think they ever met together personally, even though maybe a sponsor of someone would meet personally, but sporadically.
Kester says because of this counseling, Kevin Frankie believed his relationship was on the road to recovery.
They were working toward reconciliation. There was no separate maintenance documents. There was no divorce filed because he was being led to believe they were working toward reconciliation. He wanted to be back with his family. He wanted to be back with his wife, but was being told.
So you're going to reconcile over Zoom in front of some LDS counselor who has destroyed more families than she's helped, and you don't even know where your family is, and he's working towards reconciliation. I'm also wondering if this attorney is part of the church too, because he seems to have that 1,000-yard stare too.
Told by Jody and by Ruby that in order to repair all this, you need to stay away, and was being told that, hey, with you away, everything's blissful. The kids are doing well. Everything's just great.
On Monday, both Ruby Frankie and Hildebrandt were set to appear in Washington County Court for a status hearing discussing bail. Law and Crime Network was at the courthouse when attorneys filed a motion to delay the hearing. Kester tells us the hearing was pushed because attorneys received new and crucial information from law enforcement, but couldn't give us the specifics. He also says his client isn't quite ready to speak publicly.
And when you and I had texted previously, I asked whether Kevin wants to speak, and your reply was interesting to me in that you said Kevin does want to speak, just not now.
Correct.
So if not now, when?
When the dust has kind of settled. He just doesn't want to jeopardize. He doesn't want to say something because we've committed to the court. We're not going to disparage any of the family. And Kevin's gone above and beyond that.
Folks, when they had the court appearance last week, and I think that the court, the judge sees, as well as the defense attorneys, see how much worse this is than they first thought. Almost no defense attorney would want their client to sit in jail while they work on the case. They would go for a bail hearing and try to get their client released. However, they perhaps didn't want even more information to be released at the bail hearing that would make it look even worse for them. So they said, well, let me get more of the discovery material, which we all know if you follow this channel. Discovery is all the evidence that the prosecution has. They have to hand it over to the defense. So apparently, Ruby Frankie's attorney was overwhelmed with the amount of evidence and discovery material that he had to go through, so that he wasn't ready to do the bail hearing, to get her an application to have her released. And the way bail works in this country now is it seems almost everyone gets bailed, unless you're the most egregious killer, murderer, serial killer, then maybe you won't get bail. It's turned so much the other way, it's ridiculous. They don't, in most jurisdictions these days, they don't consider a danger to the community. Only under the most extreme instances do they deny someone bail because they're a danger to the community. Well, is Ruby Frankie and Jody Hildebrandt a danger to the community? I ask you that. I say, yes, they are. Yes, they are. They are a danger to the community. Judy Gillespie, how can anyone play a minute of the excuses the sisters are putting out there? They want the coverage. They don't deserve to be heard. And over again. Yes, but it sort of lets us know what the family dynamic is here. And could it be a potentiality that, you ever heard the old expression, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree? And I'm not alleging any crimes by Julie Deru and Bonnie Holing, who are the sisters of Ruby Frankie. However, are they similar? They all have these YouTube channels. Are they all working for the church? Are they all putting out this philosophy there that is inspired by the church? That some of the sickness, some of the craziness, do they have a therapist who they refer their clients to? I don't know. Are they putting out the philosophy of the church on their podcasts? They seem to be, they don't want it out there. They don't want to lose their podcast. Absolutely not. Melissa Martin from the chat. I wonder if the sisters will seek custody of Ruby's children if Kevin is arrested and charged in the future. Well, we had that big discussion the other day also. Is Kevin Frankie, is he liable in this case? What is his exposure in this case? Could he be charged? Could he be arrested? And my thoughts to that are, yes, absolutely. There's Kevin Frankie right there. He was part of that podcast, right? The 8 Passengers podcast. Didn't that show abuse going on right live coming into your living room? Didn't it expose them right there in that podcast? And he was part of it. So they don't have to just go back 14 months and say, oh, he had nothing to do with this. How about being, and this has nothing to do with the law right now, but how about guilt through omission rather than commission? What does that mean, omission? Omission is failure to act, failure to do something. Was it his duty as a father to do something? Because I don't buy that he didn't know about this. I don't buy it at all. And I don't think any of you guys do either. So omission. That's an interesting thought, right? JK, they have so many secrets here. Please look into soft swinging. Enough said. Yes, I've heard many different people reach out to me all the time, people from this community, and many people from this community, and that you really understand why when you listen to the 60 Minutes episode about that this church has a $100 billion in assets. 100 billion. That's just in cash assets, stocks, bonds, all that other stuff. What are they waiting for? What are they holding on to it for? What do you need that much money? You know, just really crazy. Lady Prudence, there was always a type of glee whenever Ruby described the punishment she imposed on the kids. You know something, Lady Prudence? I noticed that too in her face. Louise, you're right. I hope the judge sees it that way also. Yeah, it's really scary. Sondi Curtis, seems as if Utah has their own set of rules. Well, yes, a church is running the state of Utah. Janine Dove, face blue, wide eyes, face blue, wide eyes. This is a crazy case. Maybe they blame themselves. Yeah, it's very, 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 very scary.
That he's not only not disparaged anyone, he's reaching out to try to bring this family closer together and to kind of heal wounds. And so in terms of him speaking out, I think he wants to accomplish the objective that he wants to get his family back together. But I think at some point he'll want to tell the whole story. I just don't think this is a time to declare war. And he and I have counseled, and we believe that this is a time for healing. A lot of bad things have happened to this family, and he values his family and he values his children above all. And he's committed to doing whatever it takes, even if it's him remaining silent. He's committed to doing that in order to make the future better for his children.
Meanwhile, Kevin Frankie is fighting for custody of his children through a series of juvenile hearings in north central Utah. Kester tells us those hearings may not remain public for long.
It's pretty much just scheduling. The court is taking under advisement a motion to seal the proceedings and to restrict certain people from the courtroom, and probably a pretty broad swath of people, just to protect the privacy and confidentiality of the things that we're discussing involving the children, because they have a right to have their privacy needs met. And I think it's a good thing.
The children never had their privacy needs met when they were on this podcast for years that exposed their entire life to the whole public. How was it not important then that there they are right there? How was it not important during all these years that Ruby Frankie had 2 million, and someone said at one point 2.5 million subscribers to her podcast? That's a lot of wood. 2.5 million, and then I don't know, there was many complaints against her podcast. Did she actually voluntarily discontinue her podcast, or was it taken from her? That would be very difficult to find out. Gloria Fritz, these are only words, and these children should never be returned to these so-called people. But Gloria Fritz, it's common in the world of child welfare that they want to return the kids to family, whether it's the mother or the father, or whether it's extended family. That is usually the goal of the Bureau of Child Welfare. In Utah, again, it's called the Child and Family Services, because they want them to be with blood relatives. And so when you say they should never get returned to family, well, I think the father, Kevin, if the investigation reveals he's not culpable, then perhaps he should be considered. You may all get up in arms and say, no, he should never get the kids. I don't think Ruby should ever get her kids back, because obviously these allegations, and it's right, it's on video, there's been, I don't know how, and whether these, the 8 passengers YouTube has been deleted, law enforcement still get access to it. So that can still be used as evidence. So that is the strongest evidence probably they have. And then also these connections episodes. How was Ruby Frankie ever considered to be a counselor that has no credentials? Wishing B, kids should be returned to people they know if possible. 75% of kids who are foster kids don't learn how to read. 60% of kids raised outside of family end up homeless. Wishing B, I think that these kids were already homeschooled. So I don't know how well their homeschooling taught them. I don't know if Ruby Frankie was a good teacher. That also, I think being homeschooled hurts the individual socially. You never get to interact with other children your age. And isn't that what life is all about? Interacting with other people. So if you're homeschooled, do you really get a chance to do that? I don't know. Mel Stiller, not culpable. I'm sorry, but I think he's culpable to his eyeballs. You're referring to Kevin Frankie. I think you're right. But the question was, who will get the kids? B.A. Brent, help me. I'm surrounded by these. I don't know what that was meant for. Stephanie Ledford, I wonder if the LDS pays influencers and bloggers, also are judges and jurors in that state, members of LDS. Great question. I can't answer that. I can't answer that. Judy Gillespie, why Kevin hasn't been charged? Kevin, LDS BYU, if he is charged, he will lose parental rights. Well, look, this is so far away from going to court at this point, but we'll see. If the investigation reveals he's involved, then he should be charged. We'll see. Folks, if you're looking for a good attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired member of the service, a retired police officer from the NYPD. And you can reach Joe at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Joe's not only a fantastic defense attorney, but a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we really appreciate everything that Joe has done for us on this podcast. Naomi McFarland, if Kevin did get the children, will he continue where Ruby left off? Naomi, you know something? That's a great question. That is an outstanding question, and that has to be decided by the professionals who make those decisions. Melissa Martin, there are some homeschools where they get the children together weekly for socialization with other homeschooled families. That's great, but it seems it was indicated that these kids had no friends. Stephanie Gould, you're welcome. They had no friends. They had no interaction with other kids. And we understand why now, right? Because they were hiding something. They were hiding, obviously, the abuse.
As Law and Crime Network reported, shocking allegations came out of a previous juvenile hearing when Ruby Frankie appeared virtually. She claimed one of her children started having problems at age 3 when they began looking at pornography. While Frankie didn't mention the child by name, she alleged her child sexually assaulted one of their younger siblings, which led to that child sexually assaulting other kids. Kester says his client would prefer if future hearings are closed off.
He thinks that it serves his kids' best interest to give them as little of publicity as possible. I think it was very damaging the last time when the reporter snuck into the courtroom and then divulged very, very confidential and information that Mrs. Frankie stated about one of their children. And I just think that was damaging to everyone. It was especially damaging to the child. So I think that's the kind of thing the court's trying to prevent. He wishes it wouldn't have been published, but in terms, because it's involving his son in a very confidential matter, I shouldn't comment about that. I shouldn't comment about my client's belief about that.
Meanwhile, Kester doubles down, saying he believes the entire Frankie family was brainwashed at the hand of Jody Hildebrandt.
It's a very delicate situation. These kids have been horribly brainwashed, indoctrinated, and it's scary.
Brainwashed by who?
Jody.
Do you believe that Ruby was brainwashed by Jody?
Yes. And I say that because everyone, the focus has been on Kevin. Where was he? Why was he absent? How does that all happen? So he was doing that at Ruby's direction, who I think was being directed by Jody. This is the way that you've got to repair your marriage and repair your family. So they were all sort of kind of being manipulated, and this is just my opinion, by Jody. And I think she knew what she was doing, and it was causing significant damage. And so when Kevin's critics are out there saying, where was he? He was acting at the direction of what he thought was a competent mental health care provider and advisor. And to me, the better question is, what kind of mental health care provider would advise a family and a husband and wife and a husband and or a father and children that this can repair your family if you just stay away from each other?
That's why I totally don't buy any of this, because it just makes no sense. Abigail Crochet. Jody advised her clients to isolate themselves, build a wedge between the parents, and took full control of Ruby and her children. Kevin allowed this and didn't stand up for his kids or himself. Absolutely, he comes across as a very weak man. What man would just allow his wife to control his kids, and that he doesn't see his kids for 14 months because he's afraid of the counselor? He's afraid of the therapist, Jody Hildebrandt. Karen Settles, police off the cuff. Thank you so much for coverage of this case. Such a sick situation for those kids. They have lost so much. Their lives are forever changed. Terribly heartbreaking. I agree. You're 100% correct. Folks, that's basically going to be our show for today. I wanted to show the sisters of Ruby Frankie more or less weighing in on this case. There's so much more to this case. The elephant in the room, we spoke about it, of course, is the church. And what is their involvement? What is their culpability in this? Are they culpable in this? It's really scary that the church isn't culpable. I think will they be dragged into this? I think ultimately yes, but they probably have the power and the money and the attorneys to get out of this. Folks, thanks again for listening. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we'll see you on the next time.
One episode just ain't enough.